This is Andrew, and this is Keen On, the daily now.tv chat show with some of the world's leading thinkers and writers. Hello, everybody. It is Sunday, March the 10th, 2024. As always, I'm talking to you from the west coast of the United States in San Francisco. The news from America, at least in political terms, is rather odd. It seems fairly certain that there'll be a Biden-Trump rerun of the presidential election in November, and yet nobody seems particularly pleased about it. Nobody either on the left or the right, or certainly in the center. As the New York Times says, everyone wants a new direction in America, but they are given the choice in terms of Trump and Biden between a continuation and a restoration. Meanwhile, the two campaigns are going back to their old ways. Yesterday, Biden and Trump went on dueling attacks in Georgia, no doubt denigrating each other. One man who's given a great deal of thought to this seeming crisis of American democracy is my guest today, Sam Daley-Harris. He's the founder of Civic Culture. Back in 1993, he wrote a book called Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. I apologize for the mispronunciation. I'm not very good, not much of an advocate for that particular word. And the book has come out every 10 years since. So the 2024 version is its fourth version, and Sam is joining us from Princeton and New Jersey, where he lives. Sam, before we get to the book, I know you've completely revised it for 2024. Do you agree that the crisis of American democracy is people are not given now what they want? Most people are indifferent to either Joe Biden or Donald Trump.
Well, let me throw a couple of numbers out for a moment. When Donald Trump was elected, 100 million Americans didn't vote. And when Joe Biden was elected, 80 million didn't vote. And in the last midterm, it was the second largest youth turnout in the vote, and 23% of youth voted. So there's this kind of very inactive, large group of voters or non-voters and youth. And in a sense, the message in the book includes elections are critically important, but so too is the time between elections. And, and yet many don't even bother to show up for the elections, much less the time in between.
Are you saying that in a way, Sam, that the Americans get what they deserve if 25% of people can't be bothered to show up once every 4 years to vote? They deserve to get such uninspiring candidates as Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
In the original edition, which this forward is no longer in the book, from 1993, there's a congressman who says, well, the American people are saying the Congress is no good, the Senate's no good, the president's no good. Let me tell you, the American public is no great bargain either. And that was actually Barney Frank. I didn't name him back.
Well, that was a Barney Frank kind of thing to say. Was he right?
Well, yeah, I would agree with that. But of course, my focus in my life is all about people being able to be remarkable, people being able to make a profound difference, even though maybe we're not engaged in what we could do. And the book's all about that, about getting off the couch and getting into action.
Do you think that there is a weird sort of symbiosis between people complaining all the time and demanding profound political change, even though they don't know what it is, and a distaste, a cynicism about politics and the kind of leaders that the system is throwing up for Americans? Are these two connected? Are they so entangled that it's hard to find what the cause is and what the consequence is?
Yeah, there's this quote in the book from Alex Steffen, a futurist and climate activist. I'll tell you the short part of the quote, and I may give you the whole thing. He said, in fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. Well,
Oh, I like that one.
wait, if
Cynicism
I'm
is obedience.
cynical, I'm obedient to the way things are. Why would I do anything? Because
Right,
if I'm
that's a
like,
good one.
but his whole quote was, optimism is a political act. Those who benefit from the status quo are perfectly happy with a large population of people who believe nothing will get any better. In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. What's really radical is being willing to look right at the magnitude and difficulty of the problems we face and still insist that we can solve those problems. And the book lives in the and still insist that we can solve those problems.
What's your historical analysis, Sam? Was there a time in American history when American democracy worked? Do you have iconic figures? People often
Yeah.
point back to JFK, for example, who famously said to Americans, don't think about what America can do for you. Think about what you can do
Yeah.
for America. Are the Kennedy years and perhaps Bobby Kennedy, are they the last time that we had what you describe as civic courage, or is this something that's never really existed in American history?
Well, I'm of the never really existed in America with, African Americans not having the vote. My mom passed away a few years ago when she was born. She passed away at 101. Women did not have the vote because she was born in 1918. If I could, historically, I don't know if you know this concept, the story of self. Harvard professor Marshall Gans developed it. It's a kind of what happened in your life and what decisions did you make that got you to this commitment, really. If I could just quickly tell my story of self, kind of my history, as you ask about the country's history. This is a slightly shortened version. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music, and I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years. And 44 years ago, I founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby. Results, and a lot of times people say, music, poverty lobby, what's the connection? And when I look back in my life, there's certain experiences that start pointing me in a different direction. The death of a friend around high school graduation in '64, and the assassination of Robert Kennedy around college graduation in '68 got me to asking the questions of purpose. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? 9 years later, I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger in 1977. I go to this thing thinking, well, hunger is inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. I'm thinking, well, it's inevitable because, in my mind, there are no solutions, because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. But I go to this thing and it's obvious right away. There's no mystery to glowing food, clean water, basic health. I'm not hopeless about perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature. People will just never get around to doing the things that could be done. But there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my question, why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978, 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students, classroom by classroom, on ending world hunger. And just before I went into the first classroom, I read some statements from Jimmy Carter's Commission on World Hunger and others calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 high school students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you wrote him. I don't want to know if you met him, just the name. Out of 7,000 asked, I don't know if you want to hazard a guess, 200, fewer than 3% could
Yeah, I
answer.
would have guessed there would have actually been less. But
Yeah.
but Sam, I sometimes get guys like you on the show. Clearly, you're an unusual fellow, clearly pleased with yourself. Are you suggesting everyone becomes like you? I mean, what was your background? How did you end up? Where did you go to college?
I went to the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida.
So some people might be watching this and saying, here's another old white guy, rather pleased with himself, came of age during the Kennedy years, found himself after Bobby Kennedy's assassination. So what?
Well, I mean, I think the so what is, We want to make a difference. I was
We, meaning you or everybody?
no, I think everyone does. I mean, it's covered down by hopelessness and cynicism and despair and discouragement. We kind of protect ourselves from, well, we'd like to make a difference, but it's impossible. So
Well, as you quoting your colleague, cynicism is obedience. I like that one.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's another quote that I love to use by Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart, who said, "We aren't passengers on spaceship Earth. We're the crew." Well, are we? And if we're crew, what does crew act like? The whole quote is, "We aren't passengers on spaceship Earth. We're the crew. We aren't residents on this planet. We're citizens." The difference in both cases is responsibility. And the question is, does that ring true for you? And if it does, are you in action? And if you're not, what are the barriers? And there are some real and serious barriers.
Is the core of your argument in reclaiming our democracy, Sam, that people need, in terms of reclaiming our democracy, that every citizen needs to be engaged? They need to show up. They need to know their congressperson. They need to write letters to that elected politician or to their local newspaper. Is that the core argument in your book?
Well, yeah, I would add one more thing to it, but I was listening to your interview with Jeffrey Rosen, The Pursuit of Happiness.
Who's an excellent fellow. I'm sure you know his work.
Yeah, and the focus on the pursuit of happiness, and really the focus on virtue in a way, is that pursuit. The main message of the book, it's in the subtitle, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. That's the main theme. Everybody knows transactional advocacy, sign the petition, transaction complete.
Very Trumpian, the word transaction.
Yeah. But with transformational advocacy, you're trained, encouraged, and then you succeed at doing things as an advocate, like meet with your member of Congress and bring them on board to your issue that you didn't think you could do. And as a result, you see yourself differently. You see yourself in a new light. And the problem is there are very few organizations that deliver transformational advocacy. I mean, there was a study by the independent sector last year that found that 31% of nonprofits do advocacy, which was less than half than 20 years ago. 31% doing advocacy, less than half than 20 years ago. And if I could, it just gets a little worse. There was a Congressional Management Foundation survey that found that 79% of advocacy professionals said an email form letter was their main form of advocacy, their main tactic, an email form letter. But only 3% of congressional staff said an email form letter made a big difference. So we're being fed these email, put your zip code in and we'll send it off for you. You don't have to think. We're being fed these email form letters like petitions, and 3% of congressional staff says that makes a big difference. So even if you want to get involved and do some really important work, you got to look really hard to find a group, that could train you, really.
So thinking historically, as you noted earlier, you got into American politics in the 60s. You were roused by Bobby Kennedy and his assassination. What's happened since? How much worse has the system become?
Well,
in terms of your argument about the absence of what you call transformational advocacy, and the fact that Americans, for one reason or other, are not engaged, have failed to reclaim their democracy.
Yeah. It goes both ways. I mean, I don't want to belittle the many people who are engaged, but I think the online stuff has really helped disintegrate democracy, where I think that
Wow,
when I
that's pretty radical, Sam. What do you mean,
well,
just online stuff? You mean
well,
any?
if I sign the petition, I think I'm done. I think I've made a big difference. Or if I'm ranting on my Instagram or Facebook account, I think I've done something important for our democracy. And that's all pretty meaningless stuff. And that's, much of what we
But I'm not necessarily the greatest defender of social media, but some people might say, well, I'm on these platforms. They have a lot of power. I have a lot of followers and networks. At least it's a way of getting my message out. What's wrong with that?
Okay, well, okay, I'm going to kind of come around the corner with that. I was talking with the head of organizing of a very big organization. You would know their name really well.
Well, you can tell us,
No,
Sam.
I'm not gonna, I never
no one
do.
listens to this
Wait,
show.
wait till he said to me, we can't let our volunteers write letters to the editor or op-eds because they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. So protecting their brand was more important than empowering their citizens. Well, one of the
You
groups,
should, you should out whoever this person is should be
no,
outed, and their organization should be out, because that's
no,
absurd.
so
Isn't it? I mean, that's just ludicrous.
Well, yeah,
And anyone who's working within an organization, if they're told they're not allowed to express themselves online, then they probably should quit.
I apologize, but that's the attitude of a lot of the big nonprofits. Protecting their brand is kind of what.
But isn't what you're describing then a bigger problem, a structural problem of philanthropy and and the philanthropic economy or lack of economy in America? We've done a number of shows on that. So it's all part of a similar kind of rotten system.
Yeah. Let me kind of come around on that last bit about we can't let them write letters, they'll screw it up. I coached a group called Citizens Climate Lobby its first 7 years. So when I started coaching them, they had 0 members, 0 chapters, 0 letters to the editor. The first year of COVID, their volunteers had 4,300 letters to the editor, op-eds and editorials published. So one group saying they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. Citizens Climate Lobby saying, well, what do we have to do to help them get it right? And give that to them. And the net result was by 2020, they were having 4,000 plus letters, op-eds and editorials published. So, it's a mess at one level, and it's kind of inspiring at another in terms of what people are able to accomplish.
We're speaking with Sam Daley-Harris, the author of Reclaiming Our Democracy, the 2024 edition. This is the 4th edition. He wrote the first one in 1993. He is a lifetime advocate of activism, of being engaged in democracy. Going to remind everyone that high-quality guests like Sam Daley-Harris are brought to us by our friends at Liberties, the quarterly journal of culture and politics. Addresses a lot of the issues, actually, about our current supposed crisis of democracy. Going to run a short feature on Liberties, and then we'll be back with Sam Daley-Harris to talk more about how to address the crisis of American democracy. So don't go away, anyone.
News, the noise, there is nuance, insight. Liberties is not just a journal of ideas. It's a meteor of intelligent substance. It's the place to be for engaged citizens. Politics, opinion, substance. Liberties is a triumph for freedom of thought. A quarterly of urgency, of cultural exploration, of intellectual delight, of immaculate prose. It's invaluable. Subscribe now or find Liberties at your favorite bookseller.
And you can subscribe to Liberties at libertiesjournal.com. We're speaking with Sam Daley-Harris, a lifetime advocate, democratic of democracy, of activism in America, has a new volume out of his old book, Reclaiming Democracy, the 2024 edition. Sam, some people are watching this and thinking to themselves, well, this is all very well. This guy has his own group. He probably supports himself on the funding from it. I have a couple of jobs, or my parents have a couple of jobs. Most people simply don't have the time for this. What would you respond to that argument? I'm sure you've heard it many, many times.
Yeah, I mean, I can say I've been approached by someone who comes up and says, I'm a young mother and I have 2 kids at home and I really just can't take this on. And then somebody else comes up and says, I'm a young mother and I have 2 kids at home and I have to take this on. You know, it all depends on who you're talking to. Maybe I could tell you the story of one of the volunteers in the book. Her name is Maxine Thomas. And I always say Maxine is amazing, which she is, but I'm of the opinion that we're all amazing if we get the right training. But she's a person with a lived experience of poverty.
Say that again. We're all amazing if we get, you mean if we're trained by you?
No, but if we're trained by an organization that's committed to delivering transformational advocacy. Because she said, well, she joins a group called Circles for Low-Income Folks who are motivated to move out of poverty. They learn they have a story to tell. They find the anti-poverty lobby I founded results. She gets a scholarship, goes to the results conference in DC. And the night before her first ever meetings with her members of Congress, she learns that the earned income tax credit is about to expire. Earned income tax credit is for working low-income families. In 2020, the average family received $3,100 from the earned income tax credit. And if I could just read a little bit of what Maxine said about her first ever meetings on Capitol Hill. She said the first congressional meeting on Lobby Day was with Senator Dan Coates and brought new ahas. He was there for the entire meeting. I can still feel it. I was a ball of emotions. It felt like an out-of-body experience. I was processing being in DC, and now I'm in an exclusive meeting. We're all dressed up. It's high level. The volunteers were polished and sharp, but I was scared. Now that's typical of that first meeting, worried whether I would say the right thing. Then I got a chance to talk to the senator. I thanked the senator and said, I learned last night why I'm here. I didn't know I could come here from Indianapolis to talk to you, someone who represents us and can help us. I can't imagine what will happen if the earned income tax credit is taken away from families like mine. I'm able to take a deep breath and catch up on my bills because of the earned income tax credit. I look forward to tax time. And she goes on, and the senator says something. At the end of the full day of meetings, she concludes, I was euphoric. I was on this high and felt I was part of something revolutionary. Now, earlier in her story, I didn't say it. She said, I had a heart for service, but I was clueless to advocacy, especially political advocacy, clueless. And at the end of this day of meetings on Capitol Hill, she says, I was euphoric. I was on this high and felt I was part of something revolutionary. Well, that's available to.
Are you suggesting that there's a religious, personal transformational quality to all this?
Yes, I am. It may not happen, but yeah, I absolutely am.
Isn't it just for a small handful of people? The other questions that some people might say is, well, I've got much. It's not even that I don't have the time. I'd rather spend my time elsewhere. Why get involved in this relentless fight, which is, as you know, incredibly hard and
discouraging sometimes. Yes.
You're better off enjoying yourself or playing music or making friends or pursuing your own startup interests of one kind or another.
Yeah, well, I'm going to urge people to enjoy themselves, listen to music, and get involved. It's not either get involved and stop listening to music. So, I think it's, there's an exciting difference to be made. And I understand the discouragement. Oh my God, I'm going to get involved in a can of worms. Why should I? But I just want to say, when Results started lobbying on child survival in 1984, UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund, was reporting that 40,000 kids around the world under 5 were dying every day from preventable things like measles, coupled with malnutrition. And Results volunteers lobbied every year over the last 40 years. And the latest numbers from UNICEF are that the 40,000 child deaths a day has fallen to 13,800 a day. Still scandalously high, but it's a 66% decline in global child deaths. Well,
Sam, does your theory on reclaiming democracy, does it work on both sides of the aisle? Are you as equally sympathetic, for example, of conservative abortion activists who also claim they're saving the lives of children?
Well, my focus, I, I actually, if you were with an anti-abortion group and you asked me to coach your group, I wouldn't actually, just because
Why?
well,
Aren't they doing exactly what you want people to do? At
no,
least
no, I
in their
understand.
mind, is save the lives of children?
And I bless you and urge you to go get the book and learn from it what you can. I'm a little more selective in terms of issues that matter to me and whether I coach this group or that group. Let me give you an example, though, about the other side. When I'm coaching a group that's meeting with a member of Congress who opposes their bill, I have them ask 3 questions. Question number 1, we know you don't support this bill. What would it take to change your mind? 2, could you say more about that? 3, why do you think that is? So it's a deep listening exercise, and you're looking for assignments. I mean, I have a friend.
Yeah, I mean, I take all this, but you've got all the right words and openness and blah, blah, blah. And yet you wouldn't work with people whose ideas you don't agree with. So you wouldn't work with abortion. I don't get that. They're just as passionate. They believe as much in citizen engagement, but because you don't agree with them, you wouldn't work with them.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't shut them down or something.
No, I understand. You couldn't if you wanted to, but the problem, it sounds like you're only sort of peddling one view of the world in terms of reclaiming American democracy. So in someone might be listening to this and thinking, this guy's just another progressive activist who's saying it's my way or the highway.
Well, I don't think that's so, in that I'm constantly, one of the key pieces of transformational advocacy is working together, bipartisan, both sides of the aisle. Don't shut down your member of Congress just because you don't agree with them. Find a way to work with them. So, but to be honest, if the NRA wanted me to coach them, I don't need to coach everyone who asks for coaching. And I don't make it secret either, in that it's all in the book so they can find what they need to know there. But that doesn't mean I would spend my days coaching the NRA, for example.
Sam, what about the argument that some of the stuff you're talking about got hashed out in the great Federalist, anti-Federalist argument, that the Madison-Hamilton position was that most people don't really, for better or worse, don't have time to be involved in politics, and we can't really trust them anyway. Their hearts lead their heads. So we're going to find politicians, elected officials, to do the business of citizens. Isn't that the foundations of representative democracy? And hasn't it worked, or didn't it work in America for a couple of 100 years?
Well, slowly it has worked for a couple of them. But you said, we can't trust them, so why don't we let the elected?
I'm not saying
no. But I'm saying
that was certainly Hamilton and probably in some ways Madison too.
Right, but that's a variation on. We can't let them write letters or op-eds because they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. I have no sense that Congress would have played a leadership role in reducing global child deaths if left on their own, if there weren't advocates educating themselves and then educating the members of Congress, because members of Congress are pretty much successful business people and lawyers, or maybe a state legislator who ran for Congress, and they know everything about issues different people care about that any successful business person or lawyer would know, which isn't very much. Meaning whether it's, I would coach a group like the Quaker Lobby Friends Committee on National Legislation, which works on peace issues, or they would know as much on climate change as any successful business person, lawyer might know. So no, I think citizens need to be involved, and if they're not, they're not. But it's not because they have no place, and they shouldn't just go out and wing it. They should get educated.
But what about there's some people, again, when I say some people, it's probably me, might argue, well, the greatest legislative period in American history was the New Deal, and then perhaps the period under LBJ when anti-poverty and anti-racist legislation was passed, that came top down. How would you respond, for example, to the 30s and the achievements of FDR?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that these kinds of achievements were all top down. I mean, I think there's a famous statement from LBJ who said, "Yeah, I agree with you. Now go make me do it. Like, go create some pressure where I have to do what you want and what I see is right, but I need pressure behind me in order to get it moving." So I think that's something that we all need to consider.
I mean, it seems like when people really care, like civil rights in the 60s, it happens. What would be the movements, in your view, that would allow America to reclaim their democracy? I take your point that people should get more involved, write to their Congress people, write op-eds and all the rest of it. But what should they be writing about? What is the issue that's going to catch fire that will allow Americans to reclaim their democracy, as perhaps in some ways they did in the 60s?
Yeah, well, again, we don't have to wait for an issue to catch fire. Oh, now it's caught fire. Now I'm going to get involved. We can get involved now and help an issue catch fire. So, I mean, in other words, we can create that spark because of our involvement. You know, people have been involved in the anti-poverty lobby results for more than 40 years. Citizens Climate Lobby is about 17 years old. Yeah, you could say the climate hasn't quite caught fire yet, but yeah, people can lean in and help make that happen rather than, well, what will be the spark that finally get people off the couch? You know, let me say this. I have this thing in the book. What do you look for when you're looking for an organization that delivers transformational advocacy? And it's three things. One, recruitment and building community. Is the organization bringing new people in? That's part of the catch fire. And I don't mean to build an e-blast list, but real people talking to the real people and forming them into chapters. That's the recruitment. And then a monthly all of organization webinar with guest speakers and Q&A and inspiration. That's part of the education part of it. That's one, recruitment and building community. Two, training. How do you get the meeting? How do you plan for the meeting? How do you write a letter to the editor, et cetera? And three, encouraging breakthroughs. There's a drawing in the book of a small circle labeled your comfort zone, and there's a larger circle labeled where the magic happens. You're looking for an organization that won't kick you out, but encourage you out of your comfort zone into having a breakthrough. That meeting that Maxine had with her U.S. Senator and others, I was euphoric. Yeah, she had a breakthrough. She was encouraged out of her comfort zone.
It sounds a little evangelical for my taste. But finally, what is the role of political leadership here? Are you suggesting that leaders will just emerge and a next generation of young? I mean, the problem in America, we began here, so let's end here, are two old men, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, both seeming to me clueless, unpopular, in the pockets of one kind of special interest or another, corrupt probably as well. Where can we get these young leaders, and how do they help your young activists reclaim our democracy? What comes first?
Well, I don't know. There has to be a comes first, but meaning it could come from either side, because we have activists who started out as rank beginners and then have run for office and serve in different positions. But let me close with this story. Donald Trump in 2019 called for a 29% cut to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. And the Global Fund by then had saved 38 million lives between its start in 2002 and 2019. Most people wouldn't even know that he called for a 29% cut. And if they did, they're like, what can I do? You can't fight City Hall. The people I know roll up their sleeves. They got hundreds of members of Congress and Republicans and Democrats to co-sponsor resolutions supporting the Global Fund, to sign letters to Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, and the top appropriators. And in the end, I've got this photo with this volunteer, a woman my age in Dallas, Texas, holding Ted Cruz's hand with two hands. She said, "I learned in results I hold with two hands till I finish my laser talk on the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria." And in the end, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats stood on a stage in Lyon, France, announced that the Congress would do a 16% increase to the Global Fund rather than Trump's proposed 29% cut. And after that 3-year replenishment, by 2022, the Global Fund Partnership had saved 59 million lives since its inception in 2002. That's because people rolled up their sleeves and spoke up and met with their members of Congress and the media, and caused a ruckus and really caused a shift in